This is a beginner's guide on how to play and understand White Forest. I've heard there are some people who either don't know where to start or they understand more or less what the cards do, but they don't understand the resource economy or the basic game plan and gameplay loops of the deck. So I'd like to cover 3 different things in this video and list them right now so you know if you should just click off right now and don't bother, stick to the end, or just click ahead to whichever chapter you're interested in. First of 3, I will go over the basic idea of what the deck is trying to accomplish, while talking about the sub-engines that may or may not help you with that, including the toy stuff, the Fiendsmith stuff, and the Millennium stuff. Then, 2 out of 3, I will show you using a number of different combos how you establish the gameplay loop and the game plan, the importance of sequencing in a certain way, how you would play certain things if you're playing Fiendsmith or not playing Fiendsmith, and how you can choose between getting different types of layers on your end board, like back row or boss monsters on the field or hand traps in your hand. And then thirdly of 3, I will show you my deck profile for the Supreme Darkness format with White Forest and explain some of the choices I've made. At every point, if I reference something that I've covered in more detail elsewhere, I will put a link to that in the description. So don't worry, you'll have access to more of that later. If you are only interested in my more advanced or niche stuff, then don't worry, that'll be most of my content. But if you care about this, then let me know and I can turn this into a beginner series. Otherwise, this may be my last beginner's guide. Okay, so the basic idea of this deck with the White Forest cards is to make Diabel, Queen of the White Forest, as their boss monster, while establishing a very particular resource loop. So this card has 2 effects. If it is synchro summoned using a tuner synchro monster, which is almost all of the time, you can target a spell or trap in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Of course, you can do that with floodgates, but usually there's a particular way that you set this up so that you're just looping resources over and over. Then its other effect is when your opponent activates a card or effect, so this is a when trigger, so you just add this directly to the chain. You can send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard as cost to special summon a level 7 or lower tuner synchro from your extra deck, graveyard, or banishment. And the main gimmick of this deck is that they will often send spells or traps as cost to do something, and then you usually get value out of sending spell or traps as cost. So this usually has 2 targets that you'll bring out. This has Silvera, which is not once per turn, and says if it is special summoned, you can Book of Eclipse the entire field, so change all face-up monsters your opponent controls to face-down defense position, but also Illusion and Spellcaster synchro monsters you control gain 500 attack, and they have double piercing, so it's pretty easy to OTK with this card. The other in-archetype option is Arciela, so this is usually a part of your basic ladder. Unfortunately, this is once per turn, but if it is special summoned, you can send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard as cost, add a White Forest card or Light Spellcaster monster from your deck to your hand. Also, it gives Illusion and Spellcaster synchro monsters 500 attack, and they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Now, it's very important to note that White Forest and Azamina are basically the same deck because LZ Azamina of the White Forest is both a White Forest and Azamina card, and you get to this through your White Forest engine, and this searches your Azamina stuff, which is basically a fusion package, so I'll explain that in a moment. Now, briefly, I will cover the optional sub-engines here and then get straight into explaining the gameplay loop with some combos. So the toy stuff was the first thing that was popular because this fits with the theme of trying to establish a resource economy. So the most important part of this card is that from your hand, deck, face-up monster zone, and or graveyard, you can choose up to 2 monsters with toy in their original names that can set themselves from the hand as spells and set them in your spell and trap zone as spells. So the box will get the tank and the soldier and set those cards so that you can send them for free off of all of your White Forest cards that send a spell or trap for free. But these aren't just free sends. When they're sent to the graveyard, then they can special summon themselves. The tank gets to tribute itself to special a level 6 or lower monster from your hand, or if you control boxed, you can special from grave instead. The soldier is the better card because not only does it special summon itself if it is sent to the graveyard, but it can also, when normal or special summoned, add a box from your deck to your hand, or if you already have box, you can add a level 4 light monster instead, such as Sylvie, which is a starter, or Rusia, which is an extender. Okay, so the Millennium stuff, I will link my video on this in the description, but basically this creates 2 level 8 monsters on field to go into either Zombie Vampire to mill 4 and then special summon a card, so that's usually if you're digging for Engine, or if you already have Engine in hand, you can make Photon Lord so you have protection from monster effects. Lastly, we have the Fiendsmith stuff, which I think everyone's already familiar with, but while this is in a vacuum the most broken of all of these engines, it also has some interesting kind of synergy with some of the plays you would make in the deck, and I'll give you some examples of this as I explain the gameplay loop. Okay, I will go straight into the example gameplay loop because I think it'll be more interesting to talk about how the cards work there. So the most basic possible ladder you can do is you're going to start with LZ. For the sake of simplicity, I'll just be using this for all of my combos, and a blank spell or trap. Obviously, you prefer spells or traps that help you or do something, but we're just going to choose a blank to show you in a vacuum what one LZ can accomplish. So the LZ will send a spell or trap to the graveyard to special summon itself and add a white forest monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. So we special summon it by sending the imperm, and now we get to add a white forest monster, which is going to be Sylvie. So Sylvie, when normal or special summoned, gets to search for a white forest spell or trap. Normally you want to get this card, Tales of the White Forest, as early as possible because this card doesn't work on its own. You have to control an illusion or spellcaster monster, which is why I only play one of them. But if you do, you can add a white forest monster from your deck to your hand. Now, you don't actually want to activate this right now. You first want to make your main part of the ladder, Arciela, which can send a spell or trap to the graveyard to search either a white forest card or a light spellcaster monster, which can be effect failure, and I'll show you why you might want to do that later on. But, like with all of the white forest cards, if your spell or trap is sent to the graveyard for cost by a monster effect, you get to reset it. So even though we didn't get to use this yet, it doesn't matter because we send it to resolve this card, and now we can reset it, and now we can activate it, and we get Azamina LZ. So this is basically all you need to complete the ladder, and usually with Arciela, your search depends on if you need an extender or not. Like, are you going to search another engine card, or do you want to search an end board piece? So in this case, one of the most generic end board pieces we have is Woes of the White Forest. This is basically the most generic power trap that can special summon a white forest monster from our hand or deck. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, you can synchro summon one white forest synchro monster. So I explained before that our boss monster, which I'll summon in a moment, can do that, but so can our trap. So now when we summon Diabel, typically what we're going to do is Diabel, when it is summoned using a tuner synchro, which was our Arciela, this is a tuner synchro, can target a spell or trap in the grave and add it back to hand. The reason that we usually add Tails back to hand, even though we've already used both effects, the one to reset itself and the one to search, is because on our opponent's turn, we want to be able to use Diabel's effect where we send a spell or trap as cost to be able to cheat out one of our level 7 or lower tuner synchros. So it's usually going to be the Silvera to Book of Eclipse their field. And so on our opponent's turn, we want to send the Tails so that can reset itself again, because of course it's once per turn. And then this will be follow up on the next turn to help us OTK or just out-resource our opponent. The Azamina LZ, when it is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, that's really the most important part of this card, aside from the fact that it can reveal it in hand to special summon a white forest or Azamina monster, which is almost always itself. That's how we complete the ladder into the level 8. This will almost always give us the Deception of the Sinful Spoils. So this searches any Sinful Spoils, but I'll show you why you usually search for this one. So now we've completed the White Forest specific plan. So we get Diabel, we have a free send, which is also follow-up, and we've gotten whatever our other layer is. In this case, we have another way to special summon our Silvera out of turn, because remember, Silvera is not once per turn. We can summon it off of this. We can shuffle back the Silvera into our extra deck because all of our level 4 tuners have the same graveyard quick effect where they target a white forest synchro monster you control or in your grave, return it to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon this card but negate its effects. So if we bring out the Silvera off of our Diabel and we book their field and they continue playing, we can use Sylvie's effect, shuffle back that Silvera we just resolved, put this on field, so now we have a level 4 tuner. Our Woes can special summon a level 2 non-tuner, and we can Silvera again for 2 Books of Eclipse. Okay, but with minimal cards, so not showing us anything else in hand, just off a single LZ, I want to use our Deception to continue with our Azamina stuff. So I will preemptively use Sylvie's effect, shuffling back a synchro monster in grave. Of course, you usually want to use your resources in grave because this is a resource deck and not get rid of your boss monster. So we're going to shuffle back the Arciela to summon out our Sylvie. And now we have a free body that we contribute because Deception says you contribute a monster from your hand or field to add an Azamina card from your deck to your hand. So we're going to add Hallowed Azamina. This is a very interesting fusion spell that can fusion summon by sending Sinful Spoils cards from your hand and or field to the grave. So basically how this works is if you're summoning like a level 6... they're basically level 6 and level 8s, okay? So there's a level 6 Alias Sylvia, which is an Omni-Negate. There's a level 6 Murcielago, which is a Searcher, and a level 6 Sol, which is a free send. And if you summon the level 6s, you need to send one Sinful Spoils card from your hand or field to the grave. But if you summon the level 8s, of which I'm currently only playing Moa Regina, then you need to send 2 Sinful Spoils cards. Now we only have one Sinful Spoils card right now, which is Deception, so we can only summon the level 6s. If you're interested in how to play around Nibiru, I have a video that I will also link on that goes into depth on how to play around Nib no matter where they hit you at any timing, so you can also go and watch that. But for now, I'm just going to activate my fusion spell, so I will send my Sinful Spoils card to the grave to special summon one of my level 6s. Here we search for Murcielago. This one, when it's summoned, can search for a Sinful Spoils card, and we're going to search for the Wanted Seeker of the Sinful Spoils. You will almost always do this, but you don't have to. There are other targets for it. But the basic idea is you're going to search for Wanted, and then there's another once per turn effect that your fusion spell has where you can shuffle back an Azamina monster from either your field or grave to add it back to your hand. And the fusion effect is not once per turn. So our Azamina LZ is in the grave, so we have an Azamina card in grave. We can shuffle that back into our deck to add Hallowed to our hand. And now, because we search for another Sinful Spoils cards off of our Murcielago, we can fusion summon again. Actually, like infinite times, as long as we could continue getting this back to our hand. So here we'll do a little trick where we go Hallowed. So we need to send a Sinful Spoils card to fusion summon, but we only have one, okay? But we didn't use our Wanted yet, and we still want to get value off of it. So what we can do is we can chain the Wanted to the Hallowed. Now, the reason that this works is that cards are not sent to the graveyard, spell and traps aren't sent to the graveyard until the end of the chain. So Chainlink 1 Hallowed to fuse, Chainlink 2 Wanted to search, so when the chain resolves, backwards we go. Chainlink 2 Wanted, we add the Diabel from our deck or grave to our hand. Chainlink 1 Hallowed will send a Sinful Spoils card to the graveyard, so you see that in the chain, this is being sent by an effect of Hallowed to bring out the Ilia Sylvia. And only now at the end of the chain are our spells and traps that were activated in the chain sent to the grave, and Hallowed goes to the grave. So this is why you cannot, for example, have a Detonator pop your card and have that send your Sinful Spoil cards to the grave and Hallowed resolve. Hallowed has to be the card sending the Sinful Spoils to the grave in order to resolve. So anyhow, we now go for our Omni-Negate Ilia Sylvia. So this says, when your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you contribute this card, negate that effect. So you always want to have your Omni-Negate just to protect you from whatever on your board. There's no reason not to have it. Now, because you search for the Witch, you can send the Murcielago, which is really just a searcher that you don't need the body for anymore, to the graveyard to summon your Witch. This is an inherent summon, so this does not trigger your White Forest cards, because it does not send as cost. There's no semicolons, there's no cost. When Witch is summoned, you can set a Sinful Spoils card from your deck. Now, there are lots of options that you can set with this. I think the most generically useful and least bricky of them is probably this card, which is also both a Sinful Spoils card and a White Forest card. So, you can search this with your Sylvie, you can search it with your Arciela, the Synchro level 6, and you can also search it with anything that gives you Sinful Spoils cards. This is basically a quick play fusion that can fusion any type of monster, using monsters from your hand or field. So as long as you have the materials, you typically would go into like a Guardian Chimera, or if you play the Fiendsmith stuff, you can also make other types of plays, which I'll show you later. So what happens here is you go to end phase, and this also has a resource economy effect, where if it was sent while face up from the field to the graveyard, in the end phase, it can reset itself. So your basic end board looks like you have your Diabel on field, which is your main boss monster that can, when your opponent activates a card or effect, send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard, which will be your Tails that will reset itself and be follow up on next turn to usually bring out your Silvera. And remember, it can bring it out from not just the extra deck, but also Grave or Banishment, and that will Book of Eclipse your opponent's field. You have your Woes, if you're playing Woes, where you can, as long as you can use your, graveyard effect to the Sylvie, shuffle back, like a used Silvera or whatever to bring itself out. You now have a level 4 Tuner, and your Woes can bring out the level 2 non-Tuner, which will usually be the Azamina LZ, because then when that's used as Synchro Material, you get to search for another Sinful Spoils card. And yeah, you get to Silvera twice. You have your Omni-Negate, you have your Fusion spell, and you have follow-up off of your Deception of the Sinful Spoils. So that is the absolute most basic gameplay loop using White Forest and Azamina. But it can change pretty dramatically based on if you play the Fiendsmith stuff. So you have two options if you're playing the Fiendsmith stuff. There is making Desirae and there's making Wave High King. I'm going to show you both and go through the combo a little bit more quickly to show you why I think the Wave King is better in our deck. So you go for the basic ladder where you're trying to make Diabel, remember, and the Diabel will add back your Tails, so you have that as a free send on the next turn and also follow up. And your LZ is sent as Synchro Material, so this will allow you to search for your Deception, which is how you bridge to the Azamina stuff. Then, because you still have, a Sylvian Grave, actually, you can bring this out for free, tribute that off of Deception to get your Hallowed Azamina. So now the Hallowed can bring out our Murcielago, which will search for our Sinful Spoils card. And remember that the Hallowed graveyard once per turn effect can shuffle back an Azamina card, such as our LZ Azamina, to add itself back to our hand because the fusion effect is not once per turn. And because the Murcielago search for our Wanted, which is a Sinful Spoils card, we can activate Hallowed, but do our little trick here, Wanted Chainlink 2 to search for the Witch, so that when this resolves Chainlink 1, the Hallowed will still send the Wanted Seeker of the Sinful Spoils and bring out our Omni Negate. Now I am showing that you want to have extra bodies on field here. You don't want to send your Murcielago to summon the Witch, even though this doesn't do anything else right now. So you want to send like a free card from your hand to summon the Witch, and the Witch can still give you access to your Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, which of course is your quick play fusion spell that will either get you Guardian Chimera or Sol, which I'll show you in a second. Now, because you have your Omni Negate and your boss monster, you'll turn your 2 used bodies into Closed Heaven, because of course any 2 bodies make Fiendsmith. So here you can make Lacrima, dump Engraver. Of course, everybody knows how the Fiendsmith stuff works. And here you can go into Sequence. Now, the reason that I don't like this is that this uses all of your Fiendsmith engine. The Sequence shuffles back all of those Fiendsmith cards. And so while you do have Desirae as a boss monster added to your field, you don't have any Fiendsmith follow-up. So what I think is probably better is if you make the Wave Hiking Caesar, and I'll show you why I think this is better. It adds a lot more layers, and you don't have any less boss monsters when you do this. So again, we do the basic ladder where the LZ gets the Sylvie gets our Tails, the Arciela searches for our Woes, so we have multiple ways to try to use Silvera. You know, like maybe they stop our Diabel out of turn from summoning the Silvera, but we still have our Woes as insurance. So, you know, we're trying to play through as much as possible here. And we're looping our cards, we're summoning Murcielago, we can shuffle back our Azamina LZ to get back our Hallowed, the once per turn Grave effect, fuse again, chain Wanted, get Witch, and this brings out our Omni Negate. Now we send a blank from hand to get the Witch and turn these into Closed Heaven. The difference here is that you can make Necroquip and summon Engraver to go into the Wave Hiking. The main difference here is that because you do not fuse your cards away with Sequence, you still leave the Requiem Engrave and the Lacrima Engrave. And also, the Engraver will be engraved because this is a material under the Wave Hiking Caesar. So you still got your quick play, you know, Guardian Chimera or whatever. You have your Omni, you have your boss monster and Diabel to bring out your Silvera, and you have your Woes for your insurance for a second Silvera. In the end phase, you get back your Deception, which is, you know, more free stuff on the opponent's turn. So here you can use your Lacrima effect, shuffle it back into the deck to bring out Requiem from the grave, then Requiem can bring Lacrima out, which can then dump the Paradise. So now you have an additional layer here where when your opponent special summons, you can banish this to dump your Desirae from the extra deck, and you don't even have to play Sequence. You know, you can take Sequence out of your deck and just leave the Desirae as a Paradise card. So it's really hard for your opponent to interact with you when your layers are spread out. If you've committed every single thing to your board, you know, you could lose to 1 Dark Ruler, which is why typically you want something like a Woes or the Quick Play Fusion spell. But if you have also something in your grave, then that's an additional different type of layer, and that's why I think that this is better. Because Desirae would have been your boss monster. Now you have a Wave King, which is sometimes better than Desirae, but also you have a very hard to stop layer here. I should also mention that there's this card, Azamina Sol. So this requires an Illusion monster and a Fiend monster. Or, of course, you can just summon it the normal way with the Hallowed Azamina fusion spell, ignoring what its requirements are, and it still counts as a correctly summoned monster. And if this card is fusion summoned, you can target a card on the field, send it to the graveyard. So, of course, sends are better than destroys usually because it triggers less things. And then it has a resource economy effect where it says during the standby phase, you can target an Azamina or Sinful Spoils card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Those are once per turn. But because this requires an Illusion and a Fiend, the cool thing about this is you actually have an Illusion monster in your Diabel. So, you know, like let's say that you've used your Diabel effect, okay, and you've summoned a Silvera, or you tried to use it and they negated it. You can activate your Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, and instead of making Guardian Chimera, you can send your Illusion, the Diabel, and a Fiend monster, which is the Lacrima, that you don't even need on the field anymore. This was just really to get the Paradise dumped, so you would have an additional send, right? So you can send your Diabel and your Lacrima to the graveyard to special summon a Sol, and that gives you a send. If you are playing Desirae and you actually summon it off of Sequence, you can send the Desirae after you've used it with your Quick Play Fusion spell and the Diabel, and then you can trigger both the Desirae to send in the graveyard and the Sol on summon, and so you can like chain block your sends. So I'm just trying to say that, you know, I think that this is like a really, really strong type of resource loop to establish. Okay, I think the last 2 things that I want to show you are what happens if you try to add even more layers. So I showed you if you have boss monsters and you have back row and also you have Paradise and Grave. So you got Monster Zone, Spell and Trap Zone, and also Grave. But what happens if you want even more? So where this would diverge from your normal combo is the Arciela, instead of searching woes, is going to search for a Veiler. There'll be more on this in a moment, but we were normally using Arciela to search for woes, and so that is a back row effect card. But because we're going to get access to Sinful Spoils of the White Forest anyhow, it's not like we're removing our back row layer entirely. We're just weakening it so that we can add a different type of layer. This won't just be Veiler, so stay tuned. So here we summon our Azamina LZ to complete the ladder as usual, and this gives us our Deception because we've used the Azamina LZ as synchro material. Here we can make 2 level 4s because you search for a Rusia, so usually you can only do this if you have 1 extender, and so you can bring out the Sylvie from Grave by shuffling back the Arciela we used in our ladder, and instead of immediately tributing that Sylvie for Deception, we're going to special the Rusia from our hand, because remember, if we control a White Forest monster, you can special this from hand, and now that we have 2 level 4s, we can make Gallant Granite. And Gallant Granite can search a rock, which is going to be Nibiru. And we still have a free used body on field that Deception can now tribute. So before we go any further, the value of having hand traps that you can search so you can reliably access is not only do you have monsters on field your opponent has to interact with, not only will you have a back row that can stop your opponent even if they stop your monster zone, not only can you establish a Paradise and Grave and whatever other Grave effects for your resource loop or for whatever else, but you also can search very powerful hand traps. And you may say, well, they know you have Nib, they know you have Veiler. Okay, so what are they going to do? They're going to play around the Nib and the Veiler and all of my monsters and my back row and the Paradise and Grave? I don't think so. This forces them into an impossible position where they can't interact with all of your layers, and it's extremely hard to beat this deck when you have all of these layers. Anyhow, Deception will tribute our Granite because it's being used to search for our Hallowed. We bring out Murcielago as usual to get our Wanted, and now we can add back Hallowed by shuffling back the Azamina LZ. We can Hallowed, use our trick, chain Wanted to search for the Witch, and still the Hallowed will send that Wanted in the chain to bring out our Omni Negate. In this case, so I haven't been showing, but Wanted has a graveyard effect where let's see, where does it say? You can banish this card from your graveyard during your main phase, target one of your Sinful Spoils, spells, or traps that is banished or in your grave, accept itself, place it on the bottom of the deck, and then draw a card. This is a pretty important part of your resource economy too, because there's sometimes cards that you need to get out of your grave because you want to search for them, but you can only search them from your deck. Here, I'm just going to use the Wanted draw because I need a free send to bring out my Black Witch. Remember that if we're going to go into Closed Heaven, we're obviously not going to use our Omni Negate or our boss monster, right? So we want 2 bodies on board, and we don't want to give up our hand traps either. Of course, you can do this. You can make the judgment call based on what's in your hand to get rid of a Nib or a Veiler to be able to do this play, but generally speaking, we consider that hand traps are very important because of the type of layer they are. So now that we have 2 monsters on field, the Witch can set our Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. Again, remember, this can make Guardian Chimera, or it can make the Sol for a send out of turn. Now that we have 2 bodies, if we were playing the Fiendsmith stuff, then we could go into the Fiendsmith stuff. If we're not playing the Fiendsmith stuff, it doesn't really matter because these are the 2 on-field bodies for Guardian Chimera, and we only need 1 more monster in hand. So this is a very reliable setup when you're not playing Fiendsmith and you're just on the pure stuff that doesn't waste any of your resources. So yeah, then you would just use your fusion spell whenever and make Guardian Chimera. The last thing I want to show you is actually 2 more things. So if you are playing the Fiendsmith stuff, and again, I'll go through this a bit more quickly. You need a couple extra bodies in your hand to make this work, and the Arciela will again search for an effect Veiler. You're going to go through your tails to get your Azamina LZ, and of course, when you ladder, the Diabel will give you back your tails, so you have, a good send that will reset itself. The Azamina LZ gives you the Deception. Now you have your Hallowed, you get up Murcielago for the Wanted. You can use your once per turn Grave effect for Hallowed, shuffle back Azamina LZ, so you can fusion again with Wanted, which you chain for the Witch, and again, you establish those 2 bodies. So now that you have your Diabel boss monster, your Ilia Sylvia Omni, your back row in the quick fusion that can either be Guardian Chimera, or if you have the Fiendsmith stuff, a Sol, you can now turn those used bodies into the Closed Heaven. So Closed Heaven into Requiem, into Lacrima, which dumps the Engraver. Remember, you don't dump Paradise on your turn. You can always do that on your opponent's turn. So you want to dump the stuff that allows you to continue to play. Here, what I'm showing is that you don't just need to make whatever Fiendsmith body and pass turn. Lacrima is a level 4, so let's be a little creative here. we have the Sylvie in the grave. We still have our Arciela in the grave that we can shuffle back to bring the Sylvie out. And now we have 2 level 4s. We didn't even need to search the Rusia for this. So those can go into Gallant Granite. And Gallant Granite can again search for the Nibiru. So there are many different ways to get into this. So now we can bring the Engraver out. So we have another Fiend body. And remember that the sequence says 2 monsters, including a Light Fiend. They don't both have to be that. So of course you could turn these into sequence if you wanted to make a Desirae, which, could be based on your matchup. It could be based on what you've decided to fit into your extra deck. And you can pass turn here. Even if you are not making Desirae, you probably would still summon out the Engraver because it means that your Sinful Spoils of the White Forest is more flexible because you have 2 bodies on field that don't do anything that will be your materials for Guardian Chimera. So whether or not you were making sequence, you would probably still want to do this. However, remember, you still have your Lacrima set up. So Lacrima can shuffle itself back to bring out Requiem. Requiem can then tribute itself to bring out Lacrima, which can then dump the Paradise. So you still get all of this, and you can send whatever you want to use Guardian Chimera. And also, you still have the option to make the Sol, even though you didn't go into Desirae, because you have an illusion in your Diabel. This is an illusion monster, and you have a Fiend in your Lacrima or your Engraver. And so you can still make the Sol here. So yeah, you have tons of flexibility if you make these types of plays. The last thing I wanted to show you, I think, is a very, very unreliable combo, but it's worth knowing this because when you don't draw any of your White Forest cards, there is a way to full-ish combo still. So you either have to draw Black Witch or Wanted to do this. Because Witch is not as good of a card as Wanted is in terms of the resource loop, most builds will play 3 Wanted and 1 Witch. I won't discuss that in that video. So here we have 2 blanks and we have a Wanted. So I will activate the Wanted, search for the Witch. Now I can Witch pitch one of my blanks, so this is just a Fua here, and summon the Witch. Of course, when Witch is summoned, I can set a Sinful Spoils card from my deck to my hand. In this case, we're not setting the Fusion spell because that's a quick play that we can't use. We're gonna set something we can actually use now. So Deception, we can activate Deception, and remember, Deception can tribute from hand or field, but we need field presence, so we're gonna tribute our other blank monster to search for the Fusion spell. Now we can Fusion spell and send the Deception to bring out our Murcielago, and we haven't searched off of Murcielago. Now this card we normally get the Wanted with, but we've already used Wanted, so we're not going to do that. We can add any Azamina or Sinful Spoils card from our deck to your hand. So here we will search for LZ Azamina. The reason we're searching for this is because if we have, where does it say here? So it must be either Fusion Summon or Special Summon from your extra deck by sending the correct Fusion Material monster cards you control to the graveyard. So it requires a Fusion Synchro XYZ or a Link monster and then a Spellcaster monster. So this is a Fusion monster and this is a Spellcaster monster. So we can contact fuse into a Chorozo, which is a level 4 tuner monster. So that also means that we can now summon our LZ Azamina. But because we used our Murcielago to go into the Chorozo, that was in our grave, and that means we can use the Hallowed Azamina's effect to add itself from grave back to hand by shuffling back our Murcielago. Remember, normally we shuffle this back from the grave, but we have to change the sequencing a little bit so that we have a spell or trap in hand as fodder. So now when we special summon this from hand, we haven't even normal summoned yet, okay? We have a level 4 tuner and a level 2 non-tuner, which means we can go into Arciela. We haven't used a single White Forest name besides Azamina LZ. Now, because we added Hallowed back to hand, we don't even have another way to fuse with it. We have something to send off of Arciela. So the Arciela will search for a White Forest card or a Light Spellcaster monster. And because Azamina LZ was sent to the graveyard as Synchro Material, it can also search for a Sinful Spoils card. Now, we want to get as much value as possible, right? So while we're adding LZ, we want something that we can get value off of if we send it, because this has to send a spell or trap from your hand or field to the graveyard as cost to special summon it. So we're going to send the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to the grave as cost to search for Sylvie because we didn't normal summon. And because this is a White Forest spell or trap, it will now reset itself because it was sent as cost. So we can finally complete the ladder and make our Diabel, and that will allow us to add back, for example, Hallowed Azamina. Depending on what's on our grave, if we had like other stuff in grave, we might choose something else. But remember, because this is a Sinful Spoils card, if we want, we actually can Fusion Summon our Omni Negate and send the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. You can see like the flexibility of this card is in that it is both a Sinful Spoils and a White Forest card. And this is why I would choose to play this over basically any of the other targets, including Woes of the White Forest, if I had to choose between them. So we've still gotten to our boss monster in Diabel. We've still gotten to our Omni Negate despite not opening a single White Forest monster, and We haven't normal summoned. So now our Sylvie can search for whatever else we want. If we don't play Woes, or we're worried about not having a free send, we could search for our Tails. You could search for Tails off of the Sylvie, and Tails could search for the Rusia. You could special summon Rusia. You could go into Gallant Granite and search for a Nib. But you just need to make sure usually that your Diabel has a free send. So you're either going to search for your Tails and keep it in hand, or you're going to search for a Woes, and then either you'll resolve the Woes or the Diabel will send the Woes, and of course it'll reset itself after that. And so that's how you use the Chorozo here. And then, of course, your Deception will always reset itself in the end phase. The reason that I don't really like this combo very much, even though it looks, amazing. And, of course, if you've left the Sylvie on field, your Woes is already alive to go for Silvera, and you can book the opponent's field. And if you summon a Spellcaster Tuner in your opponent's turn, you can add the LZ from your grave to your hand. So that's, an important part of the resource loop, too. And you can still bring out your Sylvie. You can do whatever you want. But the reason I don't like this is because this combo basically loses to any interaction. So if you really haven't drawn any White Forest cards, and you go for this, your opponent has to have nothing for this to be an actual starter. You could do this to bluff to your opponent that you have nothing so that they use their limited interactions on it, and then you get to use the engine in your hand, but that's also kind of a risky play. Okay, so I have showed everything that I want to show for point number 2. I have gone over both the basic overview, the sub-engines you can play, and shown you the resource loop or the game plan of the deck, and now I will show you the deck that I have been playing on Ranked Ladder. So there are a couple decisions that I'm not sure about, but generally speaking, I think that this is a decent template for how you can play the deck, and here is how I have organized it. First of all, we have 3 ofs, the LZ and the Sylvie, because these are the best starters. You have 1 of LZ Azamina. I actually like playing more than this because sometimes you want to search for this card, but you weren't able to get it out of your grave. But it's very important when you play a multi-card combo deck that you don't go above 40. The number 40 is very misunderstood in Yu-Gi-Oh! It actually does not matter if you're just playing a 1-card starter deck, like even up until 50, even up until 60, the math on drawing just 1-card starters actually does not change that much. But if you need to draw more than 1 card, it does change very quickly. Once you get above like 42, 43, it starts to matter a lot. So I'm only playing 1 LZ Azamina because I'm trying to stick as close to 40 as possible while also playing a large Fiendsmith engine. 1 Rusia because even though I don't really like this card, I think before Alliance Insight, you probably still need to play it in case your Sylvie is removed and you need another level 4 tuner, or for plays where you're going to go into like a Gallant Granite to search for a Nib. I play 1 Tails because it doesn't work on its own. You usually want to search it, or conditionally it can be useful in your hand. Veiler is not only part of the hand trap ratio, but as long as you're on hand traps, you should play Veiler because it is technically searchable. You don't have to search it, but you should have the option. The Nib is here because in my side patterns, I have a Gallant Granite. So when I know I'm going first, I put in the Granite so that I can choose to go for the route where I make a rank 4 and search Nib off of that if it's good. Then I'm playing a combination of mostly hand traps and also some breaker type cards. So there's Imperm, which is additionally good in this deck because sometimes you don't have a good Speller Trap send and you just need to make sure you at least have some Speller Trap to send or you can't play. Droll because it's pretty good against what most people play on the ladder. Ash because you must play Ash in this deck even if you're only on breakers so that you don't lose to Charmies. Playing against Perulia is extremely difficult. Playing against Fulos is also extremely difficult before Alliance Insight. Black Goat Laughs is one of the best possible sends because when you send a Speller Trap for a monster effect, you want value off of it, and this card being in the grave is arguably more useful than it being on your field. So this is a free send. It also works as a breaker because, for example, your first play could be your opponent set up a board, you go LZ, pitch Goat, and you chain Goat because the Goat will go to the grave as cost from LZ, and you chain Goat and call like Detonator or whatever. So before your LZ even lands on field, they can't even pop it, you just chain Goat. Fulos because the card is strong and we need, we like drawing because we need multiple cards to play. It also happens to be a monster, so there's this weird dichotomy here where you want spells and traps in your hand at all points, so you have fodder to send, but you also need monsters to tribute off of the Deception to get for your Hallowed, the fusion spell. So you need a mixture of monsters and spells and traps. I'm playing 1 Talents because... not just because it's a good card, but because if we get hit by 1 hand trap and can't play, you really want to Talents and usually dig for 2 cards, and then you usually can still play there. Subversion is a breaker type card that is a Sinful Spoils card. It's a very strong type of removal because it pushes back to the spell and trap zone, so they don't usually get to use the resource again. But because it's a Sinful Spoils card, you can search it off of, your Azamina LZ, you can search it off your Murcielago, you can search it off your Black Witch, so it's very, very searchable. And it also has the additional flexibility of, like, let's say you go through all the combos I showed you, and then you use your woes out of turn, and you synchro summon into like a Silvera for the first or second time. You would usually be bringing out one of your level 4 tuners from the grave, and then woes specialing Azamina LZ from your deck because you shuffled it back. And remember, Azamina LZ doesn't care if it's your opponent's turn. If it's sent to the grave as synchro material, you can add a Sinful Spoils card from your deck to your hand. So you can, even if you've gone first, you can still add this, during your opponent's turn for the crackback, so you can break their board more easily. I've chosen to play 1 Witch and 3 Wanted. Usually you prefer to search the Wanted, but this is very important for the resource economy. So, the banish the Wanted to put back something and draw. In games that go more than a couple turns, you usually want to use this effect more than once. So I do think that the correct ratio is either 2 or 3, but not 1. You can play it at 1, like it's technically possible, but I think that it's better to play it at either 2 or 3. Then I'm playing the largest Fiendsmith package possible besides a third tract. I think a third tract would be good. The thing is that the Engraver and the Tract are very strong cards along with Requiem for baiting and Ash. And if your opponent ashes LZ, you may have no White Forest plays and have to go through like a Chorozo line or not do White Forest stuff at all. So any cards that bait your opponent's stuff before you've committed a White Forest name, like Engraver or Tract or Requiem and they ash, helps your White Forest stuff resolve. So I really like the Fiendsmith stuff. Paradise, you could put it in the side. I just have it here because I'm kind of uncertain about my side deck patterns. In terms of my extra deck, I am choosing to play the Wave Hiking stuff with Desirae because I'm maining Paradise and no sequence because I never actually want to lose my Fiendsmith resources in the grave. I want to keep using them. I didn't mention this before, but Chaos Angel is basically mandatory in this deck because it's a level 10 synchro, which is very easy for us to make. Like usually off of an Azamina card like Murcielago or a Sol that we've used or like an Engraver and then one of our level 4s. So it's a pretty strong card for us, and I think you basically have to play this in all deck lists. You do not need to play Guardian Chimera if you are on Fiendsmith and playing Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, because this card can make Sol instead. But I like playing Guardian Chimera because there's some turns when you can't get to Fiendsmith stuff, like if they ash your Requiem, even if you've gone through Closed Heaven, and you want to fall back because like you've searched this because you want it to do something. So the only issue I have with this deck right now is that there are slightly too many engine requirements. Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, Hallowed Azamina is necessary, but, combined with Sinful Spoils of the White Forest and Paradise and Woes, these are all cards you don't really want to draw going second. So I would like to take out a Woes, but I'm currently just testing playing the Woes in here as well. If I was taking out the Woes, it would definitely be in my side deck, and I would, take out the Fulos, because the easy side is you take out 3 Fulos, and then you put in sealing cards, such as Scourge. So this is really like good against breakers. When you've established your board, you can tribute a Synchro Monster, which is usually going to be your Diabel, and then target a face-up card on the field, negate its effects until the end of the turn. But you don't lose the thing you tributed, because if you tributed a White Forest Synchro Monster, then you can special summon an Illusion Monster from your grave. And this is all in the same chain, so this does not lose to a Bestial. Like if they go, Dark Ruler, and you chain Scourge, tribute your Diabel, in the same chain that you negate the Dark Ruler, this will also bring back the Diabel. I have a very cool gameplay that I show where I also use this to OTK. If you're interested, you can also watch my gameplay. And won't explain too much about the rest. Anyhow, if you thought that was helpful, let me know. If you think I should continue the beginner series, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just go back to the more advanced stuff. Anyhow, feel free to join the Discord and at me. And thanks for watching.